But on KTN Home, we're still live on KTN News. We're yet to be switched on. And that's basically what we're going to discuss this morning in the newsroom. You're welcome to participate in the conversation. The hashtag is Morning Express KTN. If you'd like to tweet, it's at KTN News, or you can tweet me directly, and that's at Michael G. Gitonga. The guests that we have this morning, who I'm going to introduce very shortly or briefly, their Twitter handles are also going to be displayed as we carry on, and feel free to interact and participate in the conversation. So straight to the guests that we have this morning. To my immediate left, we have Eric Odur, who is the Secretary General for the KUJ, Kenya Union of Journalists. Good morning and thank you for joining us. We have Henry Maina, who is the Regional Director for Article 19. Thank you for joining us this morning. Last but not least, Victor Bluray, who is a Programs Manager for Media Council of Kenya. Pleasure. Thank you for joining us, gentlemen. I'll start first of all by just building a background on literally the media being in the dark. And that is, literally being switched off. And it started off, first of all, earlier on, but we'll get to the history of it, but a statement that was put out by Linus Kaikai, who is the chair of the Kenya Editors Guild, and it was titled a Statement on Direct Threats by Jubilee Government Against the Media, Kenya's Editors Guild. And I'm sure you've read that statement, but I'll also refer to the Constitution, Article 34, which clearly states on the second part that the state shall not, I repeat, the state shall not exercise control over or interfere with the personal engagement in broadcasting, the production or circulation of any publication or the dissemination of information by any medium. And it continues. Let me start with you, Henry Maina, on the question as to whether this is something that media should have sensed was coming, and possibly whether we should be preparing ourselves for harder times.
Yes, I think it's important that the media in Kenya reads the telltale signs. Anytime such actions come up, we seem to be caught unawares. Yet, in reality, by what, say, for instance, Koome was saying, and the subsequent statements from the Deputy President, anybody who was a bit discerning would have seen that there were only three strands of what the government could do. One, ensuring that the swearing in didn't happen by heavy security deployment, and two, by switching off any possible amplification for what was likely to happen at Uhuru Park, or three, getting into a negotiation with the opposition. Those were the only three possible things. That the media continued probing what will happen with Raila.
Correct.
Would he really come? Without them assessing their own situation, which was option two, was to me naive. But let's think through it and say, even if the media were discerning, what would they have done? Would you have taken your own security people to Limuru transmission points and blocked them? No, because one of the things that we need to be operating in is rule of law as opposed to rule by law. So in these scenarios, the assumption all Kenyans as a democratic people were thinking that everything would be done lawful. That the government decided to effect the second scenario illegally is the challenge the country falls into. That there are due processes that the government should have followed in the event that there was reason. And to the best of my mind, there wasn't reason. Because if you read the Constitution and you read the programming code, you realize that the government has measures through which it can raise complaints before it reaches the disproportionate action of switching off. So we must discuss this context from an illegality that is still ongoing. It wasn't a temporary illegality. It is an illegality that is now running to the second day. Nobody is telling us that they had a court order anywhere. Nobody is telling us that these were the reasons as to why these media houses...
There's still no explanation as to why we are where we are.
And three, if you're thinking about the Constitution again, there is something that is called fair administrative action, that every public servant who carries out an action, it must be fair. So where is the communication to KTN? Where is the communication to Nation? Where is the communication to Citizen? Clearly stipulating reasons as to why those actions have been taken and what recourse they had.
All right, Victor Bluray, your thoughts on whether this is something we should have discerned, and like Minor mentions, even after discerning, really, is there much that we could have done?
Thank you, Mike. One, it's true, because your media managers attended the State House meeting. It's not that it didn't happen. They attended. So
and Linus Kaikai infers to that when he is giving that particular statement that he gave.
And the people have, and in the subsequent statement by Samuel Maina, it confirmed that there had been a meeting on Friday. So why those who attended the meetings, if they were genuine, did not help their media houses in planning on how to deal reels of insincerity and lack of loyalty to your company? Because I am, by yesterday I learned in one of the media houses, their CEO came and briefed them and said, guys, you need to be careful and caution in terms of approaching, because this is the situation. And that then helped that company, whichever cautionary approach they used, it has saved them. Because we are talking about loss of money. So whoever from, say, example, KTN, NTV, and Citizen attended that meeting and were aware, would have helped, not necessarily to fight government, but a strategy that would have helped minimize what we are talking about. So we must be asking, even we journalists, the boards, and what, be asking the people who attended it, where is the sincerity and loyalty? And how are they helping their companies? Because if this was an emergency that was coming, and they were sincere, they ought to have shared and helped their companies today, because most of the people who attended were senior executives. But
is it possible that the information they were given they felt was illegal for them not to, for instance, we are still guessing as to why the shutdown was there. We can only guess that it's possibly not to transmit live what was going, or rather what was happening at Uhuru Park. And is it possible that maybe they felt that whatever information they had been given from State House, because that's what we are anchoring on, was going to border on illegality and therefore just ignore it?
If they thought, I would think that if they thought it was an illegality, the best strategy was to publicly denounce it. Because yes,
it's from one of the media houses, and reading Linus' statement, you hear where somebody has just learned. We are on a WhatsApp group, the media stakeholders, and by Monday, somebody threw a line that guys, there are guys who are called at State House on Friday, and this happened. No, there's a guy who made he made a statement. And some of us then probed him. And it was clear that a meeting had taken place. His manager had also been part of the meeting, and they had been briefed. So that's how then it's, and many of the senior executives who are being mentioned were there. So where is their sincerity? Whether it was illegality or illegal. And here to me, it's not about them helping their media defy or fight with the government, but strategizing and saying, this is the environment. How else do we deal?
How do we work around it?
How do we, how else do we reach out? Maybe for mediators and what, so that before that time reaches something, because Friday and Tuesday is almost 4 days, something would have happened if they were sincere and came out. Because when the first time you remember, Baba, while you were away, when Raila came from the US some years back, there was such a thing. During elections, the issue of media houses that will not do this and this will be shut down was there. So where do our media houses stay to say they didn't anticipate such a thing? So are we doubting then the management skills of our media managers, or is there a problem somewhere? Because you must scan an environment and understand, and not necessarily to fight back, but to strategize, to appeal. If, for example, the people who attended the Friday meeting felt this was an illegality, they could have asked for broader involvement. The KTN person or who attended the meeting will have also inform the other managers that this is happening. How else do we deal? How else do we lobby so that such a drastic action is not taken?
It's not taken.
Two, like Henry is saying, and we had this discussion yesterday, a very long discussion around it. That's why people were saying Media Council has not issued a statement. Because we're also saying, in addition to a statement, but we need to understand what happened. Who shut down the media houses? I mean, is it CA? Was CA providing just technical support? There are a lot of things. Two, as a mediator, we are trying to understand, because we know there's a crisis. We can't run away from it. I mean, government, media, intra-media, because there also seems to be a big problem even within the media houses themselves, within the managers, within the editors, within the reporters. How else do we deal? We have a bigger problem that needs a bigger intervention. And this thing, while not looking at the merits and demerits, has already shown that media houses, and as an industry, we have been lying to ourselves. We need just to open up, face reality, and decide if we are going to be an industrial profession or if we want to play tribal politics.
All right. Eric, your opening statement.
Yes, I totally agree with Victor that at least there is a lack of sincerity in the media industry. First of all, I still don't understand why media managers can be summoned to State House and go to State House, because they don't pledge allegiance to the president. If our media manager and asked to attend such a meeting, I wouldn't attend. Because basically, once you attend that meeting and go there, as it has been stated, where the Riot Act was read to these managers, simply means that now the media actually is very weak and lacks independence. Having said that, and number two, again, on Saturday, the whole of Saturday, actually, we were with Dr. Huntington Gaya, the chair of the Media Owners Association, in a forum whereby we were talking about the role of the media in holding government accountable. And for the whole of that session, he kept on blaming journalists, that is the journalists who are very lazy, journalists who can't actually rise to the occasion, not knowing that apparently the problem is the media managers. And I kept telling him that the problem we have in this industry is the managers who are looking at the commercial interest and not the media as it should be. Having said that, I think now the way forward is we now have to look at how the media is going to get out of this crisis. To me, I think this crisis actually is a blessing in disguise. Number one, it has now come out very clearly to the public that has been blaming the media, that apparently the Kenyan media is not as independent as it should be, as enshrined in the Constitution. That some of the things that we've seen in the media is not by default, by design, because of the state interference. Secondly, now the media needs now to come out and now become bolder and tell the public that now the public, we need your support, we need your trust, we need your confidence so that we can be able to fight this war, because it already is now a war that the media must now reclaim the independence that has been taken away by the state. Because we've always stated, even in this program, that if we do not have a free media, journalists will not do their work as it should be. Once your boss has been summoned to State House and has been given orders and directive that this is what you should do and this is what you should not do, then it becomes very difficult for me, a journalist who report to these managers, to be independent, because basically what they'll do, they'll start learning bad manners from their managers. And exactly that's what we are seeing in this country. And it has also come out very clearly that now Jubilee government actually is becoming to the worst threat to the media and violates the Constitution. Because when Supreme Court was delivering its verdict on the August 8 presidential petition, it said very well that a society can only thrive if there is a rule of law and fidelity to the Constitution. Because like you rightly read from the Article 34 of the Constitution, that the state cannot interfere with the independence and the operations of the media.
Okay. What? And is the problem here the government? Because to imagine that media and government are going to be friends would, of course, be a misnomer. There's no place where we're there to watchdog the government. So is the problem here really the government? Because they're not expected to be friendly to the media or the managers. Because here is a problem that we have managers who possibly may have been privy to what is going on and maybe even agreed to some extent. And as a result, when we went against whatever the agreement was, then we were shut down. So is the problem really the government or the managers that we have? Because we're there as watchdogs.
I will say that the problem is the managers. Because it seems the strategy that has been adopted by the managers to cooperate and to work with the government is not working. Because it's the same managers who are complaining that the government is not giving the advertising. The same managers who are complaining that the government is not paying the bills. There are some pending bills that the government has not paid. So that means that the strategy that the managers have adopted is not working. That's why I said is now, how are we going to come out of it? Are we going back to the drawing board? And like Victor said, that as the industry has been speaking, and I think we'll be reaching out to everyone so that we can come up with a proper strategy on how to address this, because the strategy that has been adopted to work with the government is not working, because actually the government is not doing business with the media houses, and even the little that the government has done with the media houses, payment becomes a problem. So that means that it's now a wake-up call to the managers that now we need to go back to the basics and see how can we work and make sure that we have an independent media.
All right, Henry, one of the reasons that we're possibly where we are is mainly to do with the business side of media, because at the end of the day, it is an expensive exercise and requires income, but at the cost of possibly not being independent. Do you foresee a time where we possibly can be independent enough, where we don't have to rely on government, and that way we can be the true watchdogs?
I want to begin by giving an example of a small media house in Namibia, which ran a newspaper called The Namibian. And for nearly 15 years, The Namibian never received any advertising from the government. And what that did to them was to understand that it is foolhardy to have one big advertiser that dictates 40 to 50% of your revenue. And therefore, they had to think for those 15 years, for their own survival, how do they operate minus the big player, which is the state. And I would tell you that after those years of the first president, Sam Nujoma, when they had the second president, Pohamba, assessing and making a decision that the government was losing its platform of informing Namibians, because the Namibian never carried any of the government messages, Pohamba made a decision to say, I want to reverse the decision of his predecessor, Sam Nujoma. The result was that still the Namibian thought through its process. It now runs as a side trust, which pumps in resources for purposes of circulation of public interest issues. So it's not 100% dependent on the commercial kind of thinking for its public good side. Yes, it needs adverts, but it's not entirely dependent on it for survival. So that's one thing that we need to continuously ask ourselves. But I want to differ with Eric a bit, that the problem here is not just media managers. The problem is government. This government has said it wants to move us into a digital economy, and creative economy, and information economy. How can it do that if it sabotages the media? That clearly tells you that there is a policy incoherence. You can't be attacking the media every day, bastardizing them, delegitimizing their actions, yet you are an economy that is saying we want to be an information economy. So there is an incoherence on the side of government. But two, as I said, there are illegalities on the side of government, that the actions taken, we've seen government officers threatening and beating up journalists without action. When citizens now have begun to take that situation, remember, early in the year, we talked about the issue of the spokesman of the deputy president threatening a nation journalist. A few days after that, we saw citizens allied to KANU party beating up 8 journalists in Turkana. This is the vicious cycle that we are getting into. And if we are not able to see the big picture and continue to look at these issues as anecdotal, separate issues, then we will miss the big picture. Because government delegitimizes media, citizens begin to feel the media is the problem, then how is it going to function as a commercial entity.
I'll put it this way.
Let me ask you to hold that thought, Eric, because I want us to take a very short break and come back and maybe address that, but also look at the way forward, because media seems to be caught between a rock and a hard place, because the citizens feel the media is not representing them. The government feels that the media is, well, basically exposing them and possibly being unfair to them. But that's a discussion that will continue. For now, we take a short break. When we come back, what way do we map as the way forward?